Yes. Yes, there's, yeah. So, yeah, Andrew's, one of the guys who works in the department provided some of that. So there's I believe there's a memo forthcoming. Hi, Kent.
Hi, Myron.
Hi.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'd like to call today's Committee of the Whole meeting to order on Tuesday, January 20th. It is 6:03 p.m. I think we're sure.
Davis? Here. Lampy? Here. Berg?
Here.
Bartz?
Here.
Blanky?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Arnett?
Here.
Wetzel? Moldenhauer?
Here.
Okay, thank you. The only agenda item today is under business presentation of one-way, two-way streets.
If you don't know me, I'm Nathan Williams, civil engineer for the city. I'll kick off the presentation with just a brief background of the study and how we got to where we are today. So the engineering division retained R.A. Smith as consultant for the downtown one-way to two-way streets conversion study. This study evaluated the feasibility of converting one-way streets within the downtown area to two-way operation. Preliminary results were made available in August 2024, after which we took it to Public Works Commission, Public Safety and Welfare Committee, and Common Council for approval. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation included this two-way operation in their 2028 Main Street reconstruction design, but the study could not be finalized at that time due to the Main Street Bridge reconstruction, which prohibited traffic data collection in the area. Once the bridge was completed, updated traffic data was gathered, and the study was refined and finalized. The traffic data confirmed that the assumptions made in the preliminary report were correct. And then within this final version of the study, 3 options were presented regarding the block of Main Street between 3rd Street and 4th Street, pertaining to designated turn lanes on Main Street and potentially affecting on-street parking, which is what we are asking for direction on tonight. Justin will go into more detail on these options and the traffic study in his presentation, and then we can go over recommendations and next steps.
All right, sounds good. So I'm Justin Schuler. I'm a traffic engineer with R.A. Smith. We're a civil engineering firm located in Brookfield. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Watertown, 2003 high school, Watertown High School graduate. So I'm very familiar with the one-way street network in downtown, traveled it many times. I attended Marquette University for civil engineering, and then I've been working at R.A. Smith for almost the last 18 years. So I'm going to be talking about the conversion study from one-way to two-way streets. in downtown. Just a quick outline of the presentation. The intent here is to provide an overview of the study and a summary of the process and findings. There's significantly more detail in the formal written report, and we can revisit any slides in here, any of the content topics, questions that you might have as we go through it. Kind of starting off, the study scope and goals. So the overall study area encompasses the downtown street system, basically from First Street or the river to 9th Street, and then Western Avenue up to Division Street. And the study goal is to determine the feasibility of converting the one-way streets in this area to two-way operations based on safety, traffic operations, and design. We conducted a more detailed operational and parking analysis along 3rd and 4th Streets, primarily due to the more complex nature of those streets. They have higher traffic volumes, they serve as truck routes, they serve various commercial, institutional land uses. So took a little bit more detailed look at those two streets. And then the other local one-way streets, primarily residential, lower volume, we conducted a more feasibility evaluation on those streets based on the available roadway width and just how those would function as two-way streets. This graphic shows kind of our general study process. So the traffic study was broken into 2 steps, as Nathan mentioned. First was that feasibility assessment that we conducted in 2024 when the bridge was down. And that was a preliminary analysis using some historic data, really to get that sense, is it feasible to convert 3rd and 4th Street to two-way operations? And then in 2025, when the bridge reopened, we gave some time and went out and collected field data, traffic counts, intersection counts, parking counts, and revisited the study, revisited our analysis, and came up with final recommendations, cost estimates. So that's kind of where we are right now, right at the tail end of that traffic study. From here, if the conversion continues to move forward, go into a formal design plans, and then construction in 28 in conjunction with the Main Street project. Just some study progress benchmarks. Again, I mentioned that preliminary study in August of 24. Went through committee review and approval at that time based on the preliminary results. Some staff updates and a public involvement meeting were held in fall of 2024. Again, we conducted the updated counts and refined our recommendations in 2025, and then we're at committee of the whole today. So looking at kind of a comparison of one-way versus two-way, why are we considering this change? What are some of the various trade-offs between the two configurations? The one-way system has higher capacity, shorter travel times. In general, you're able to move more cars more quickly. And that can be considered a negative in urban environments where you've got more vulnerable users present. There's also the potential for wrong-way movements to occur, which we did observe during our field visits, during our traffic counts. Anytime you've probably driven it, you've probably seen one at some point in time. The two-way system provides that kind of reduced travel speeds and safer conditions in the urban environments. It also provides simplified circulation for motorists. I like to think of the example traveling to the post office. If you're coming from the north down 4th Street, you got to take a right on Madison, then down on 3rd Street, then another left on Spring, and a left to get to the post office, and now you've made 4 or 5 turns before you're there, where the two-way system is going to provide that more direct routing. Also improved visibility, more direct access for businesses, and just less signage, less clutter. As we were going through this study, it was hundreds of signs that were needed to kind of operate this as a one-way system with one-way signs, do not enter signs. So the two-way system will clean up kind of that cluttered visual. Some of the other communities in Wisconsin have recently converted their downtown streets from two-way to one-way. And we reached out to 3 of these, Janesville, Manitowoc, and Racine, and just kind of discussed and got general feedback from them on their conversion process. And overall, the feedback was positive. They saw slower vehicle speeds through their downtowns, and they felt conditions were better for businesses and pedestrians under the two-way. All of the three communities noted they had few complaints or issues after the conversion, and they felt that adjustment period was relatively short. They did a lot of advanced outreach, public information meetings, getting out in the media, those kinds of things, getting out ahead of it so that when the actual conversion happened, it was relatively smooth. Just kind of a neat throwback with the pictures here, the top right. These are all from Manitowoc. The top right was in 1960 when they went and implemented the one-way streets. And then the other pictures are from a few years ago when they converted them back to two-way. I mentioned the public involvement meeting. We held that in November. Again, preliminary operational analysis and concept design plans were presented there. Feedback received at the public information meeting was generally positive, supported the potential for lower speeds, the more direct routing, the pedestrian improvements. Noted some of the concerns at the public involvement meeting, the potential for loss of parking, truck maneuverability. Noted some issues even today just trying to move trucks on and off between like 4th and Main. And then just general, some of the specific blocks, specifically on the residential streets that might have some operational changes. So looking at the existing one-way system, the map here, everything in green is a one-way street in that study area. And this is showing it's a relatively extensive one-way pair system. But really the takeaway here is that it's discontinuous through that system. So you've got sections that are two-way, in between one-way segments, and that's kind of adding to that wrong way, or adding to that confusion and the potential for wrong-way movements. I mentioned in one of the previous slides that convert or revert. So the one-way system was originally implemented in downtown in the mid-1970s to address at that time was noted as increased traffic volumes and congestion. So this slide highlights some of the existing daily traffic volumes, and just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of the locations. So the green lines on this slide are the 3rd and 4th Street corridors and the two signalized intersections with Main Street. So WisDOT, or Wisconsin Department of Transportation, collects daily traffic information and reports it, and their most current information is reporting 8,500 vehicles per day on Main Street, and then 3rd and 4th Street ranging between 1,600 to 2,700 vehicles per day. But to put that into some context, a typical 2-lane urban street capacity from a daily standpoint can be between 6,500 and 10,000 or more, just depending on the specific cross-section. The more parking and traffic calming, that kind of stuff is going to reduce that capacity, but typically that's kind of the range you're looking at. Also for comparison, like 1st Street, Katy Street, some of the existing two-lane roadways, they're carrying between 4,000 and 6,000 vehicles per day. So what we're kind of taking away from this is that 3rd and 4th Street are significantly underutilized today for multi-lane roadways operating as a one-way pair. Another note on the daily traffic. So we worked with the state to pull historic data. Again, they collect data every 3 years or so, but they had data dating back to the late 1960s here. So this is showing a few data points. Down here on the bottom right is Main Street, kind of since 1969 through 2022, and then the other locations are on 3rd and 4th Street. And kind of the takeaway here is just from about the mid-90s when the traffic volumes peaked, there's been a downward trend since that time, and volumes today out there are about one half of what they were from that peak period. Also part of the study, we conducted a crash analysis in the study area. Again, more detail in the report, and we can revisit anything you need questions on, but a couple maps just pulled from our crash evaluation. So the one on the left is a dot diagram of
920285026
all the reported crashes during the most recent 5-year period when data was available. There were 331 crashes reported, and the most common crash type was what we call an angle crash, or a turning vehicle colliding with a through vehicle or another turning vehicle. So potentially pointing to, again, kind of those additional turn movements that people need to take with the one-way system. The figure on the right is showing a few specific crash types. So the orange dots are head-on crashes, so front-to-front vehicle crashes. There was one reported on 3rd Street and one reported on 4th Street, again, potentially with wrong-way movements. The yellow and blue dots are pedestrian and bicycle crashes during that period of time. Not a ton reported, but they are happening within the study area. So I mentioned the kind of more complex nature of 3rd and 4th Street, which required a more detailed operational analysis to test that two-way configuration. And specifically, we were looking around the signalized intersections on Main Street, kind of one block north and south, and then a few blocks east and west on Main, to really kind of nail down what would that operational condition look like under two-way configuration. We utilized the Highway Capacity Manual, or we call HCM, the nationally recognized methodology for operational analysis, and synchro traffic analysis software to conduct the analysis. And I said, trying to stay high level, but the models, the analysis is showing acceptable operations on 3rd and 4th Street as two-way. And we did do surplus capacity tests as well. So we took the volumes that were collected, redistributed them to two-way, and then increased them 15%, increased them 25% to kind of stress test that system. And we were finding even at those increased levels, there was still acceptable operations. So expecting surplus capacity if those volumes do kind of rebound in the future. And I mentioned the daily traffic is well within those capacities for two-way streets. Diving into a little bit more detail, so this shows kind of a by movement operational analysis at the two signalized intersections with 3rd and 4th. These are reported, or the Highway Capacity Manual reports based on a level of service. They give it a letter grade between A and F, and it's associated with an amount of delay. So how many seconds of delay does it take to move through an intersection? And there's a chart there on the right that kind of correlates those delays to a letter. And just generally industry standard here, we consider level service D as acceptable, D or better. So here we're seeing all level service is C or better under the two-way configuration. All right, so we had mentioned kind of the three alternatives we had looked at for left turns. So we also utilize simulation software to kind of help us with this left turn evaluation. Today, Main Street doesn't have left turn lanes except eastbound at 4th Street, so traveling east to north from Main to 4th, there's that full block length of left turn lane. Otherwise, there are no left turn lanes on Main. So what the analysis we're looking at in this area is, what happens when a vehicle, the blue one here that's circled in red, is waiting to make a left turn, and they need to wait for the opposing traffic to clear, and then it backs up behind. So under the two-way configuration, there's more opportunity for those to happen, just with more movements. But based on the traffic data collection and the analysis, there's not a ton of those left turn movements outside of the 4th Street. So it's something that's happens, but not every cycle, not every minute. And the HCM methodology doesn't really fully capture kind of that short-term impact. So that's going to help us with that simulation. And we were looking at what are those trade-offs. So if we provide additional left turn lanes, it's going to improve traffic flow, reduce queues, but that's going to come at an impact with the cross-section, right? We're going to have to find space to add additional lanes, and that would impact parking. So the first option we looked at is basically no new left turn lanes. You would keep that full block turn lane to 4th Street, but there'd be no additional turn lanes for any of the other approaches on 3rd or 4th. Just to kind of quickly run through these diagrams, so the blue bars are showing the anticipated backups or the length of a queue of vehicles that would be present when one of those left turn movements are happening. The diagram up on the right is showing the lane assignment or lane alignment, the lane usage on all the approaches of the intersections. So kind of takeaways here. So between the two signals, specifically westbound heading from 4th Street to 3rd Street on Main, we're seeing queues there that fill up about 80% of the available storage internal between the two signals. And then looking on what I'm calling kind of external to the two signals, so westbound on Main Street from 4th and then eastbound on Main Street from 3rd. Those queues backing up and up to or through the 2nd Street and 5th Street intersections. This alternative has the longest queuing reported, but it doesn't impact any additional parking. Option 2 would add one new turn lane, and that would be at the 3rd Street intersection. I don't know if this cursor shows up here, yeah. Right here, this westbound left turn from Main Street onto 3rd Street. And that would kind of provide a little pocket here for left turners to stage and allow through traffic to kind of bypass. And how we would capture that new left turn lane would be to shorten that existing westbound left. So instead of having the full block, there would be a portion of that left turn lane would be kind of switched over, and they'd be back to back. So here we're seeing those queues between the signals are reduced, kind of protecting that most critical area between the signals. But to achieve this, we are looking at some loss of parking along the south side of Main Street. On the west leg here of 3rd Street, the red X's here would be loss of parking. And really that's needed to kind of align that through movement with the receiving lane on the opposite side. So today, if you kind of think about it, you're coming eastbound on Main Street and you get to 3rd, that through lane kind of dumps you into the left turn lane, and you got to shift over if you want to keep going straight. So now we kind of have to force that traffic to realign a little bit so they'd be aligning with the receiving lane. The last option we looked at would add 3 new turn lanes. So the westbound left I was just mentioning with the previous option, and then 2 additional turn lanes kind of on the exterior approaches of 3rd Street and 4th Street. So basically for kind of the new movements onto the two-way system. This would provide the lowest queuing, kind of the best traffic flow through the area, but it would come at most of the parking along the south side of Main Street between 2nd and 5th then would be lost, basically, to provide that extra width for the turn lanes, shift that through lane down, and take out the parking lane. And we'll revisit these a little bit with some of the final recommendations in the study. But just to kind of walk through some of the other design concepts under the two-way configuration. So for the remaining stretch of 3rd and 4th Street, that conversion can really be done with kind of remarking, paint marking, and new signing. The on-street parking lanes would remain, and basically instead of a two-lane one-way, you'd switch one of those lanes to the opposite direction on both of those streets through new center line, new marking, new signing. We did note a new seal coating on 4th Street. So that seal coat's in kind of rough shape right now, and just to really help with the adhesion of the pavement markings, would look at kind of resealing that street as part of the conversion. Some of the other design elements that we provided in the study for the city to consider, including as part of the conversion, so they not be requirements, but something to kind of enhance, in this case from pedestrian accommodations, potential to add crosswalk enhancements. That could include high visibility crosswalks. So in this case, we've got an example here at Milwaukee and 4th, and we're showing the ladder style pavement markings as opposed to just kind of the 2 parallel lines. These provide those bars, that kind of visual cue to drivers that there may be pedestrian activity here. And then another possible enhancement we call the curb extensions or curb bump outs. Those have been talked about quite a bit as part of the Main Street reconstruction. Could also be applied here on 3rd and 4th Street. There's different ways to do that. They can be part of a curb line or concrete islands, or another application option would be this kind of paint and post. So there'd be paint markings on the ground and then these flexible tube markers that are optional as well. But the intent of those extensions would be to shorten those pedestrian crosswalks and provide kind of a narrowing of that traveled way to help reduce travel speeds and act as a traffic calming for drivers. We did also look at the potential for bicycle accommodations, and specifically on 3rd and 4th Street, looking at those dedicated bike lanes, so 4 or 5 foot wide bike lane that would be just for bicyclists, and it really came down to insufficient width throughout the corridor to provide a dedicated bike lane. So if you're thinking you need parking lane, bike lane, travel lane, bike lane, parking lane, there's just not sufficient width on that full extent without doing some sort of roadway widening or losing parking. So we looked at some other potential options to provide that north-south bike connection, and it could be looking at dedicated bike lanes on other streets. So like 1st Street has a wider cross-section, could be an alternative, or looking at some of the residential streets, so 2nd, 5th through 8th. Do those get dedicated as we call a bike boulevard? So it would be signed and marked as bicycles having the right of way to provide that connection between like Western and Main. But again, kind of provided to the city for consideration, but any changes, any additions would need to conform with the future ped and bike master plan. To mention outside of 3rd and 4th Street, many of the one-way streets are kind of local residential streets, lower volumes, lower speeds, different types of trips. Again, mostly serving residential properties, and a lot of those are they're traveling to and from their house and trying to get to collectors. So you're taking a lot shorter trips on these other one-ways. And we conducted what I'm calling a functionality review of those streets based on the roadway width. So the vertical face of curb on one side to the vertical face of curb on the other. How much width do we have for that to operate with parking and two-way traffic? Kind of a minimum value published for residential streets, parking on both sides, a bi-directional center lane, so not necessarily wide enough for cars to go side by side, but enough for it to function as two-way, kind of that 26-foot or 28-foot minimum to still have fire truck access. But obviously at that narrow of a width, it's not going to function like a traditional two-way street. So kind of looking at just how would these roads function from almost a driver comfort standpoint. At less than 30-foot width, most drivers are not going to drive opposing directions side by side. They would have to do kind of what's shown in this figure here to the right, where you've got a southbound vehicle, the green vehicle here, parked vehicles in blue. The red vehicle would need to wait basically at the end of the block or in an open parking space until the southbound vehicle clears. And then the red vehicle northbound can go. Again, kind of the operation of these streets is residential, low volume, lower parking occupancy, shorter trips. That kind of conflict is just less frequent in that grid system. And it also serves as somewhat of a traffic calming feature. When you hit that 30-foot width, between 30 and 32 feet, I should say most drivers there will drive side by side. It's narrow, they'll go slow, but there's enough space for kind of most drivers to kind of go side by side. When you get to the widths of 32 feet or more, then you've got enough space for 7-foot parking lanes and 9-foot travel lanes. And drivers would kind of treat it as a normal two-way street. So this map numbers are a little small there, but I'll try to highlight here. So we looked at that width for all of the street blocks on the one-way network. And what we found is most of these blocks are already at 30-foot width or wider. The ones that are highlighted yellow there are the ones that are 30 feet or less. So really just a handful of select blocks on like 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street that are kind of at that less than 30-foot width. 8th Street is at 27 feet. That one already has parking restricted on one side. So you could just continue to have that restriction and operate it as two-way. I noted the kind of two numbers here at the bottom that are outside of the one-ways, but 5th Street and 7th Street and other streets kind of south of Western are at that 30-foot width, so they're at a narrow width, and they're already operating as two-way with parking on both sides today. So there are blocks that are kind of at that narrow width now.
Just a minute here, if you could, please.
Yep.
But where you have like 30 to 36 or 27 to 37, are you saying on that street at different points on the street that it has different variance in width, or is it? I don't quite follow your range you're referring to. That because I know we have streets that within that street are wide and narrow depending on where you are on the street. So is that
Yep.
is that the example there of that street?
Yep, so like 5th Street, what I'm saying here is the widths vary between 30 foot and 36 feet, depending on which block you're on.
Which block?
Yep, so like between Western and Milwaukee, the width is 36 feet. But between Milwaukee and Wisconsin, the width narrows to 30 feet. And then Wisconsin north, it's 34 feet. So there's not consistent width as you're going north to south. So like I said, on the whole, there's, 32 feet or more for most of these block segments. And they would be able to operate as two-way streets with a little bit more narrow conditions.
And parking on both sides.
Parking on both sides, yep. So, like these narrow sections where it's 30 feet or 27 feet, you would probably see more drivers choose to not drive in opposing. They would wait kind of at the end of the block. Or if there's an open parking spot, they'd kind of pull over and wait there. One of the benefits here, just the street blocks are pretty short in this section. They're only like 200 feet long, so it's not like you'd need to wait 45 seconds for a car to clear it. They can clear through the intersection pretty quickly.
And there's not enough ability within that boulevard or right-of-way to try to make it consistent on a certain width? You don't have that latitude or that option?
So we didn't look at reconstruction or widening with any of these. We were really looking at just keeping the curves right where they are.
Oh.
Can we convert these? But I know that's kind of part of city policy to look at potential widening.
When we have reconstruction, we typically do.
Yep. Which I think happened on
2nd Street.
Yeah, 2nd Street and 9th,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so that was widened to that 34 to 36 foot width.
When I was chairman of Public Works, we did go from a one-way to a two-way on 2nd Street from Main Street going south to Western, and that went very smooth. But I don't know how much additional right-of-way we took, or do we keep the existing boundaries?
I believe we kept the existing right-of-way boundary.
Did we?
I mean, there is terrace between the sidewalk and the street on all these.
Right.
So I would think some widening could happen there. But yeah, like I said, 9th Street operates one way now, but it was reconstructed to that wider section to function as a two-way street. I don't think it was converted. But again, these were kind of that just initial feasibility assessment, something for the city to consider as they're looking to change, potentially convert all these to two-way. But it would recommend a little bit more detailed block-by-block evaluation. There's some impacts potential, around schools or churches and just how those would function. So probably a little bit more in-depth investigation we needed there. And again, just looking at the compliance with city ordinances and standards. If we're going to be if these are converted, just how does that language, how is it compatible? One more item and then kind of an overview of the recommendations, and then we'll open up to some additional questions. So we also conducted a parking study as part of this, with that potential for some lost parking on Main Street and just some of the reconfiguration. We wanted to look at what is the existing parking capacity downtown, what are the occupancies, and what would it look like under a two-way configuration? Is there surplus capacity if we end up with loss of parking? The study area for the parking study really was kind of focused around Main Street. So we looked between 2nd Street and 5th Street, and then Market and Madison. And unintentionally, I guess, we looked at on-street parking spaces and public lots, but we had 187 on-street spaces and 187 public lot spaces. So the blue bars here are the street faces where we collected parking data, and then the hatched boxes are where the public parking lots are, where we collected parking data as well. So we collected counts on a Thursday and a Saturday at the end of May. So this was after the holiday, and then after the bridge opening, a couple months after that. We collected data at 7 different hours. So we looked at midday, 11 a.m., noon, and 1, and then in the evening, 4, 5, 6, and 7 p.m. And basically, high-level takeaway during all of those peak periods, we were seeing in that 2x3 block area about 50% occupancy. Certainly, there are specific blocks and specific lots that are busier than others. But if you kind of look at it as a whole system, the 187 on-street, 187 public lot spaces, we did find surplus parking capacity. These two are a couple visual diagrams, and the one on the left is looking at the Thursday midday, so the 11 a.m. to noon was the highest parking occupancies, and the one on the right is from Saturday evening, the 7 to 8 p.m. hour. The color coding, so any of the block faces or the lots that are in green had less than 50% of the spaces occupied. Yellow was 50 to 80%, and then orange and red were 80 up to 100%. Just some of the patterns here, a midday, we're seeing a lot more usage in the parking lots, specifically north of Main Street, or I guess both north and south of Main Street. But kind of conducive to the types of land uses. You've got offices and people are working or need to spend more time during the day. They're looking for those longer parking hours in the lots. And then in the evening, more of the restaurant, entertainment type business, people trying to park right in front of those businesses, and the 2-hour restrictions aren't in place on street. So during the evening, a lot of the lots are underutilized. Okay, so a couple slides with just kind of an overview of the recommendations. So based on the analysis and the concept designs, the study, and we're recommending converting 3rd Street and 4th Street to two-way streets with one through lane in each direction. For the 3rd Street and 4th Street intersections with Main, we're recommending the option number 2, which had the 1 additional left turn lane, basically taking a piece of that existing left turn lane between 3rd and 4th and allowing a piece of that for the opposite direction. So that kind of protects, provides more storage and an opportunity for left turners between those 2 signals, but tries to limit the amount of parking impact. Generally, the existing signal operation would be similar to today. So the new northbound and southbound movements on 3rd and 4th would basically just operate at the same time as the existing north and south movements. And Main Street would generally have the same amount of time and same phasing, same left turns as it does today. You're just adding another movement north and south that would occur at the same time. We did recommend 1 traffic control change at 3rd Street and Madison, so just north of Main. That operates as a one-way stop today. We recommended an all-way stop there due to some sight distance limitations. The buildings are pretty close on the corners. Adding the new northbound movement created some conflicts. I mentioned the seal coat, and then some of the considerations from the pedestrian, bicycle, and that local street conversion potential. High-level cost estimates for the 3rd and 4th Street conversions were $175,000 to $225,000. That includes some assumptions, removal and installation of all the pavement markings, installation of signs. It was assumed that city staff would remove the existing signs and posts, so that cost was not included. The seal coating was included. We did include select applications of the high visibility crosswalks and the paint and post curb bump outs. Again, something that could be refined as part of the design, but that is included in the cost. Temporary traffic control and staging to accommodate the conversion. And then any of the Main Street roadway work, the signal work, so obviously with new movements, you're gonna need new signal heads, pedestrian heads, all of that work would be encompassed into the state project. So that cost is not reflective in this cost estimate. All right, the last, just to note here, the last couple attachments that you have is a concept drawing. So that's, this isn't a final plan, it's not for construction, but just to kind of give you an idea of what those pavement markings would look like under 2-way operation. So it's kind of split south and north here. You kind of toggle between the two, but give you something to just kind of reference on what that conversion would look like from a marking standpoint. That all. Went through a lot of information, but is there anything we want to revisit or any questions?
Before questions, Nathan or Andrew, is there anything you want to share at all?
I'll reiterate what was in the packet. There was a decision point a year and a half ago based on the preliminary results to convert 3rd and 4th Street from Madison to Western to 2-way in 2028 as part of the state project. And the driver there was really the state's design. They needed a decision to be made on bump out locations at 3rd and 4th Street, and then signal design. If we convert to 2-way, more signal heads would be needed. So that was the driver there. So that's already been in the works for a little bit now with the state's design. Nathan, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Okay, I'll open up on the other side first. Anybody on my left? Or Myron, if you want to ask first? Mr. Arnett, looks like you have a question. Or?
Just a couple questions, a couple comments.
Okay.
So first, this has been on my list for 15 years from being prior chair of Public Works, so I'm very glad to see it potentially moving forward. Particular couple questions. Did you also look at the intersections of Milwaukee and 3rd and Milwaukee and 4th in terms of potential 4-way signage?
Yes. We did look at those, so we had to delay collecting traffic counts there due to work that was going on First Street and Western, so that kind of came near the end. But we did look at those, we collected data there, and we recommended to keep those as two-way stop. Just, they didn't meet the all-way stop warrants, so the volumes kind of needed to support or justify that all-way stop wasn't meeting published thresholds. And we ran operational analysis as well and found the two-way stops would operate acceptably.
So when those thresholds, are those thresholds looking at duration for the whole day as compared to peak?
Correct, yeah. So there are certain volume thresholds over an entire day, and you need to meet at least 8 hours of those thresholds. So they're looking for, yeah, kind of consistently higher volumes throughout the day, not just peak hours.
I thought that might be the case. So the challenge we have is that a number of our streets operate in steep mountains and deep valleys. So you get a couple hours of the day where you have significantly higher volumes than during the others. And Milwaukee Street is one of those. Between 7 and 9 and 3 and 5, you get a ton of traffic, and the others, it's at times crickets. So I would like to suggest that perhaps that is something for us to look at, but I realize also it could be addressed later if we found another situation. And then regarding the 3 options recommended or looking at for the intersection of Main and 3rd, yeah.
Mhm.
What would be the downside of starting with option 1 with the idea that if we found we needed to move to option 2? Is that a plausible pathway, or is it something you need to make an absolute firm commitment to at this point?
I'd say that might be tied more to the state's project, because that work on Main Street is going to be done as part of their design. I know you've had more conversations with that manager, and I'm thinking they would want one design. And
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would impact the traffic signal design with designated turn lanes on those signal heads, or if rework would be needed if we go from option 1 to 2 or 3.
yeah,
That's something we can look into.
yeah, I would think potential for the cross-section design would change. Just looking for that extra width. And there is the pocket there. I think it would be on the west leg of 3rd Street. And trying to get that, shows up here. Trying to just get that eastbound lane alignment where you kind of have to point the travel direction down. So if you have to come back and do this change later, does that impact the curb bump out or parking or something on that
Okay.
approach there? So there'd be potential that the design would have to change. I'd
And
say
then
that would
lastly,
be-
I just have a comment with regard to the pedestrian accommodations. Big fan of the hashed crosswalks. Total not fan of bump outs. I think it's about the worst idea that's come up with in the last 30 years. So I would just avoid those at all possible costs. Just my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnett. Okay, Mr. Smith? Myron, you have any questions? I don't think so. Okay. Mr. Blanky?
So I won't echo, I echo many of Alder Arnett's sentiments, but I won't go through and reiterate all those. I do have one question. With a dedicated turn lane, does that come with a dedicated turn signal automatically?
All right, sorry. So for the new turn lane, no, that would just operate what we call permitted left turn. So there would be no arrow westbound at 3rd Street, where the new turn lane would be under option 2.
Yes, sorry, my question is in direct to the recommendation of option 2.
Yeah, so the protected permitted left turn that's there today, that arrow eastbound on Main to north on 4th, that would remain as it is now. And there would be there would not be a left turn arrow for the 3rd Street ad. It would basically just be providing a 50-foot left turn lane for vehicles to kind of store while they're waiting to turn. And really that was based on just the anticipated traffic volume. So the eastbound and northbound to 4th Street, that volume is double what we were expecting for the 3rd Street left turn. So the left turn phase would be needed to handle that at 4th Street, but was not needed to handle traffic at 3rd.
Thank you. One other question. So are you recommending that the rest of the network that is one-way streets remain that way?
You're saying outside of 3rd and 4th Street?
Yes.
I guess we're offering a consideration to the city to convert them. And we're saying functionally, on the whole, they can operate as two-way under the current widths. But it's not a set recommendation.
So my one comment then would be is I'm in favor of just ripping off the Band-Aid and turning all of these into two-way streets. And I think the ideal time to do it is when Main Street reconstruction is going on, because while that's going on, the one-way streets are going to cause even more of a headache due to the fact that Main Street will be closed. So making those streets two-way traffic while that reconstruction is occurring, I think is going to make getting around for everyone a lot easier. And it's the time, it would be the ideal time to do it, I think, for ease of transition to it. Thank you.
The streets are really narrow. They were like 27 feet wide or so. I was out by 8th, 9th Street somewhere.
8th, yeah, 8th is the most narrow one. That one though,
Take away no parking, or?
There's
So-
already no parking on one side.
yeah, there's
That's what
only
I-
parking allowed on one side today for the extent of 8th. It's restricted on one side.
It would probably operate similar to how Dewey Avenue operates today, where it's a little more narrow, but parking's removed on one side of the street.
Okay. So if we change that to two-way, parking one side would be sufficient, it would still stay the same. Okay, thank you. Mr. Lampy, go ahead.
Okay, I've got a few too. A couple that I'm hoping some folks in the room can answer, which is, do you know the years that Route 26 was put on Church, or in what year the bypass was opened? Those are kind of interesting dates as they pertain to traffic accounts and other things.
I don't know the dates, but I have some maps. So this was a 1959 map that shows 26, used to align on 3rd Street. Are you saying, and then at some point it switched?
Well, I'm wondering if that was a factor in the 1970s conversion to the one-way streets.
I don't know the exact date when 26 switched to Church Street, and then obviously it's the bypass now. So you're saying when did it change to Church Street?
Yeah, I think those are interesting dates just to kind of have in mind as we look at what are the major phases of traffic effects on downtown or anywhere else. I think those are kind of fun to have at our fingertips. Slide 11, I was just looking for a clarification. That's pick and save, right? The abbreviation. Slide, was it 11? There was one with traffic counts. It may be in a different, there it is, 10. Church Street near Pick and Save?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. My question, my next question has to do with our representative from the downtown retail and property ownership community, our Main Street program. What is their opinion or recommendation on this?
I'm fine with you coming up, Steph, if you want to. Just make sure it lights green.
To put it simply, we would vote for option 1. And that comes from several conversations with business owners downtown, also along discussion at our Main Street meetup last night and our Main Street Board of Directors this morning. The loss of 2 parking spots would affect economic vitality, and I can send out my document of arguments that I have for tonight. I won't do that because I see the time is running fast, but simply put, we would vote for option 1. It preserves all the parking. It supports the two-way conversion still. It meets the traffic standards, and it avoids irreversible economic impacts to the downtown businesses.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Lampy?
That was it, thank you.
You, were you curious on the construction of Church Street when it was widened, the 2 lanes all the way? Is that what you were looking for the year? So 02, 03, I believe, and I believe the bypass is put in like 09,
Okay. It's,
roughly.
yeah, I think
Take
those
it
are,
back.
those are, in my mind, the 2 major traffic events is what happened with 26, when it was put from 3rd to Church, and then when the bypass went up, and I think those affect a lot of traffic flows. When we look at like traffic flows all over the city and when they changed, I think that's important to know whether the cars were impacted by that.
Okay.
But thank you.
Anybody else on this side have questions? Mr. Berg?
Yeah, just to clarify again, I think I understood, but you're telling us that the intent on 4th Street going north from Main Street to Madison is going to be a two-way?
Yes, so north,
That one block?
on 4th Street?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be two-way. So basically, the entire stretch from Madison to Western would be two-way operation on 3rd and 4th.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. So as you're coming south on 4th Street, you would not have to, turn onto Madison Street. You could just continue straight south.
Very good.
Okay. All right, thank you. Engineering Department, I see Richie and Maureen. Anybody have anything to add? All the experts are all in the room. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Nice job.
Great presentation. Okay. With that being the last order of business, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Okay, motion by Lampy. Second by Bartz. Okay. Thank you.